Welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Sherry Chen, your nonprofit CFO, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this journey. This podcast dives into the real world of nonprofit leadership, sharing inspiring stories, experiences, and the truth about what it takes to operate a nonprofit successfully. Think of this as your mastermind session on the go. Now, without further ado, please welcome today's nonprofit leader. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unfiltered Nonprofit, where we interview executive directors of nonprofit organizations to enable a mastermind platform for each other. Today, I have a special guest, Rob Henderson from the BioTalent Canada. And Rob, welcome.
Well, thanks very much for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so I was reading a lot of background information about you, and it's very, very interesting. And the one that I really enjoy about is the essentially the introduction of this DEI program. And because in the back of my mind, I've seen a lot of nonprofit organizations struggling with implementing that DEI program. So I wanted to ask you how you did that successfully, because you managed to win the Best Leader in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award in Ottawa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks very much. It's diversity and inclusion. You were saying a lot of organizations struggle with it. I think I'm not sure I would say struggle with it. I think just a lot of organizations ignore it. I think they don't implement it at all. That's certainly my experience. Because if you're struggling with it, you should, because that means you're doing something right. Because we struggle with it. It's not something, and diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a destination. It's a process.
Yeah.
It's a strategy, and you need to implement it all you go. But as you do it, it gets easier because it becomes part of you. If you know what I mean, it becomes part of everything you do. At BioTalent Canada, what we do, we're an HR resource organization for Canada's biotechnology industry. So as a result, we're trying to preach the best practices possible for small and medium-sized biotech firms. And so we felt very strongly when we embarked upon this journey about 10 years ago that we had to sort of practice what we preach, right? So it's very difficult if you're telling everybody on how to do best practices in HR and you're not doing it yourself.
Yeah.
So we felt very strongly that, well, there were two things that really, number one, I think everybody in the company felt this company should reflect the country in which it resides. So and I think that's the true nature of diversity and inclusion, right? It should you should reflect the community you serve. So that was the first thing. But the second thing we found was, there was a real lack of talent, and we struggled sometimes to find talent. But that's often because we weren't tapping into where the talent exists. And there's, in a country that gets 500,000 immigrants every year, if you're not tapping into that market, you're really missing a key font of talent, a key source of talent for your company. So for us, as we built and we grew quite a bit over the last 10 years, we had to look for talent where it existed, not where we wanted it to be. So that was, for us, it was self-serving. Diversity and inclusion allowed us to tap into a whole bunch of talent that we ordinarily wouldn't have found. So a lot of people struggle as if diversity and inclusion is pushing a rock uphill. It's not. It's really quite self-serving. It's a huge advantage to your business to do it. But like anything else, it's a skill you got to learn. Like if you're going into accounting, you've got to learn accounting. If you're going to go into personnel and human resources, you've got to understand diversity and inclusion, or you're really doing yourself a disservice. So I think it's something like, if somebody is trained in other things. And a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises, they don't have training in human resource management. So it's alien to them. It's foreign. So it's a skill that they don't necessarily understand. And they find it intimidating, which is why I think they say they struggle with it, because it's a bit like going to the gym. I know I don't want to do, but I know it's good for me.
It's like using those weight equipment. Like, we know that we have to use it, but we don't necessarily know how. So are there some practical tips that you can share that they can immediately, our listener will be able to immediately pick up on and action on it?
Absolutely, and let's flesh out your gym metaphor a little bit.
Yes.
If you really are intimidated by the gym because you don't see the equipment, you don't understand how the equipment
Yep.
works, what do? You find a trainer, right?
Mm.
You find somebody who does know it, or you
Yeah.
find somebody who owns the gym who's willing
Yeah.
to walk you around. And I think that's the whole point in diversity and inclusion is that if you're not sure, there are all sorts of immigrant serving agencies
Oh,
and
okay.
equity deserving groups and associations around here that can help you out. And that's certainly what we did. We partnered with a bunch of immigrant serving agencies and other associations that had special interest groups that were specific to those underrepresented groups. And once we did that, it's easy because they guide you. You don't have to pretend you're an expert. You just do what the experts say and start letting them teach you. I think a lot of people think that they have to do diversity and inclusion alone. There are a lot of tools out there, a lot of best practices, and there are a lot of people who are willing to help you and help with the organizations because they're highly motivated to do so. So I think it's the biggest thing. It's like the gym. Once you get to the gym, it's easy. It's getting to the gym. It's finding the motivation to get up and physically go to the gym. But once you're there, you feel good about it. You know what you're doing is right. You know it's good for you. All of the same things. It's the same idea.
Yeah.
It's the same idea. Sometimes it's hard, and it's like anything else. The second time you go to the gym is a lot easier than the first time you went to the gym. And the 10th time is a lot easier than the second time. So it's all of these things. And once you go, diversity and inclusion is even easier than that because once you get the ball rolling, if you truly have an inclusive organization where the underrepresented groups and the people that you hire have a say in forming the culture, you have to do less and less because the culture has a life of itself. And the people, like begets like. So a diverse group attracts diverse people.
Yeah.
So it's very easy. It acts like a magnet, right? As long as they have a say and they feel represented within the company.
Yeah. So you had launched a few initiatives as well. So I think it would be a great idea. Just talk briefly about this whole initiative. You have Idea Committee. You have a DEI focused program called Ideal Bioscience Employer and Scholarship, and then you have other inclusive practices as well. So you're doing quite a bit. I know it has taken on its own life. It's taken. How do I say it properly?
Got a life of its own.
It got a life on its own.
Yeah.
So it's being developed probably also by your team because it has been employee-led group promoting inclusion, equity, and diversity. So
well, we started off, I guess it was about 5 or 6 years ago, just before COVID.
Yep.
And we wanted to go down the diversity and inclusion route, and we saw one of the best practices is things like an employee resource group or something. So what we did is we used the acronym IDEA, which was inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And we created the IDEA Committee, which is an internal committee, an internal committee of BioTalent Canada, made up of its employees. It's got a senior manager sponsor, which changes all the time. I'm not on the committee, so the committee has its own. I didn't want to impose my presence or any idea or feel that there was some kind of an imposing executive presence there. And they map out a lot of the activities we do, a lot of the seminars we go, professional development we implement for the company, and that's that. And it changes. It's people. It's a volunteer committee. People volunteer to be it, and so that was the first thing we did. The second thing we did, you were mentioning the IDEAL. Yeah. So that was that's an acronym as well, and that stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, Leadership. So the first thing we did was we wanted to have a designation that small and medium-sized enterprises, biotech companies, could attain to show the world, to show people in their hiring that they are espousing, that they are adopting best practices in diversity and inclusion. Yeah. So this is a designation that we hired a couple of consultants to create this program for us. And it's free. And every year in fact, we're going to be announcing it in about 2 weeks.
Oh, cool.
The new bunch of companies who qualify. So we have two designations. You have to, if you're over 50 employees or under 50 employees, there are a set bunch of criteria and you check a bunch of boxes. And if you check enough boxes, which are all best practices in diversity and inclusion, you get this little stamp called you're an ideal bioscience employer. And you can use it in your recruitment.
Oh,
You can use it on your
awesome.
website. You can use it on your marketing and your promotion. And it's a bit of a badge of honor, saying
Yeah.
I take this very seriously. We're proud of it because it's free. We do it for free. We don't. The people don't pay to get this. They don't buy it. And it's something that we were pleased to do. So we've been doing. This is our third year of doing it. And there's a few dozen companies out there across Canada that get to use it whenever they're employing, and they wear it proudly. So we're very pleased with it. This led into, and again, one of the things we found in the biotech is a lot of biotech companies do not have they don't have diverse cultures. So Indigenous Canadians, Canadians with disabilities, women, immigrants, LGBTQ plus, all of these equity deserving groups are underrepresented within the biotech company, within the biotech industry. And that's a big problem because it means they're also not getting enough talent from all of these groups. So this was a big motivator for us. Like, how do we get more, how do we raise the profile of a lot of these underrepresented groups? So we decided, one of the things about biotech industry is it's a very highly educated vertical. It means a lot of people have to have a science degree, master's degree to get into it. So we decided to create an ideal, again, that diversity and inclusion, ideal scholarship. And it was specifically for underrepresented groups in STEM who showed leadership in diversity and inclusion. So even as a student, it's not just that they were an Indigenous Canadian or a Canadian with a disability, they showed some leadership. They showed a sense of activism within that front to try to get more people either recognized or involved or included. And last year was the first time we did it. And we gave out two $10,000 scholarships.
Oh, wow.
For one, we went to a Canadian who identified as Indigenous, and another one was a Canadian with a disability. And they both entered STEM fields in universities, and it's great. And this year we're expanding that to be three.
Oh, nice.
$10,000 scholarships this year. So we're looking very much forward to. And the third one it'll be Canadian, be newcomers. So we're going to have a third scholarship for newcomers.
That's awesome.
That's going to be joining that. We'll be announcing that scholarship only in the next few weeks.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
Now, we're very proud of the program. We think it's one of the best things we do.
Hello, Unfiltered Nonprofit listeners. It's Cherry Chan here, your host and the CEO of Otis Financial Solutions. Let's talk about something that can be a major headache for many nonprofits, managing your finances. Are you feeling overwhelmed by budgeting, financial reports, or keeping up with compliance? You're not alone. Many nonprofit leaders struggle with these issues too, but you don't have to. At Otis Financial Solutions, we specialize in making financial management easy for nonprofit leaders and associations leaders. For over 18 years, we've been turning financial stress into peace of mind. Our services are designed to meet your unique needs, from day-to-day bookkeeping to strategic financial planning. Imagine having more time to focus on your mission, knowing that your finances are in experts' hands. If that sounds like something you need, I'm offering a no-obligation 20-minute consultation. Let's discuss your challenges and explore how Otis can help you achieve your goals. Visit nonprofitcfo.ca to book your call today. Let's simplify your financial management together. Now, so this is a good segue because you're giving out so much money. And in my field, we do financial management, right?
Right.
So nonprofit organizations are often struggle to balance their books to begin with,
For sure.
let alone finding another extra $10,000 to give away pretty much annually on an annual basis. I assume that is going to be an annual thing that you're
That's what we're
planning to
hoping.
do. Yeah.
And we have to find a way to sustain that because right now we are funding it.
Yeah. So then how did you come up? I mean, the idea is fantastic, but how do you fund it? I'm always getting challenged by the EDA. Like, how do I find the money for this particular program? So how do you fund it to begin with?
It's diversification. About 10 years ago, when we broke away from the federal government, excuse me, we had to find a way to fund ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we did. We created a couple of different lines of revenue, one of which is what we call our partnership program. We partner with about 80 to 100 organizations across the country, and
Wow.
we market we brand them, we give them access because we're a national network.
Yeah.
We give them access to our website, and we promote their stuff and everything else. For that, they pay us a fee, and that has turned into a very, very lucrative revenue line for us. It's also driven some other revenues, consulting revenue, as well as some our project revenue, which has allowed us to, because of the scope of our network, the government has sought us out because they can use us to get to the industry immediately. So we found a revenue line that was sort of self-perpetuating, but it allowed us to do something that most nonprofits can't do, and that's supply and generate a reserve fund.
Yeah.
So our scholarships currently come from that reserve fund. But you have a very good point, because we do want to find a model, and that may be a foundation model, it may be a charitable model, to fund those scholarships, because we may not always be in a position to do so ourselves. So we're looking at, we think it's a great brand for-profit companies to sponsor. So we're going to be looking this year, one of our mandates is going to be, how do we fund this? How do we find somebody who might want to attach their brand or their logo to it, and be as proud as we are about funding and supporting the ideal scholarships. So that's where we're going to go. But it didn't happen overnight. 10 years ago, there was no way we could have started this program. But we've been lucky enough, and I think the industry has supported us, for which we're grateful. To be able to do some of these innovative and creative things. But it is a question where I've been there for over 10 years, been there 13 years. So there's a lot of trial and error. You learn a lot by failing. Yeah. And I think the key for a nonprofit is, if you're small, you get to fail fast. And that's an advantage for entrepreneurs and for nonprofits. You learn from your mistakes. The key is to learn quickly and then correct the course.
100% agree. Yeah. But can I bring you back to the moment when you first take on this job, and then you have to somehow find a way, maybe not first, maybe my timing is a bit off, but like you take on the job, the government stopped funding you, decided to give you a letter saying like, in 2 years, I'm going to stop funding you. And so you have to figure out your way out. So at that moment, what have you done? I know you've done sales before. In our previous earlier conversation, you talked about your sales experience for 10 years. So what have you done at that point to change from like a government-funded organization, 100% to 100% independent?
So, well, I'd love to say we're 100% independent. We still get government funding, but on a project basis. So we do projects with the government, and they essentially pay us to do that. But our core operations are 100% independent. So I think whenever I've talked about this before, somebody told me that we had the advantage of desperation. So, which was very interesting. I mean, when I was hired, I had sort of a 3 to 5 year plan to wean us away from government funding and get us more connected to the industry. So that turned into about a year and a half, as you mentioned. So we didn't have much of a choice. We either had to become independent or die. So we failed fast. There was a bunch of initiatives we tried, but we found out in the industry that there are a lot of organizations who did want to brand themselves as good employers. It's not the majority of them. A lot of them ignore their HR, but there were a bunch that wanted to brand themselves as good employers. So we found them very quickly, and they decided they wanted to support us. But to start with how we did it, I think, and I didn't have a roadmap for this, so some of this stuff I found out. Some of this I found out as I went, right? And the first key was really to be 100% transparent with the team. So we had about a team of about 10 people when I started there, and when the government cut our funding, at that point only I knew. I had to tell my board of directors that this was going to happen. But I told the team, and I said, so we have a year and a half to create a new revenue line. And I said, you're probably going to be a little scared because we're facing a cliff. But I said, if you go, I totally understand, and that's fine. I'll write you all a letter of recommendation or what. But individually, you have to decide whether you're going to go or if you're going to stay. And I said, if you stay, it's going to be really a lot of fun and very interesting, and you're going to learn a lot. So because we're going to be doing something that a lot of organizations cannot do or don't do. So I would say about 2/3 or 3/4 left.
I thought you were going to give me a surprise.
I would love to have said that they all did, but the ones who stayed. There was the right ones who stayed, who wanted to roll up their sleeves and do the work. But the interesting thing too is that you can't expect the people, like, it's a completely different way of operating. So if you're going to do that as an executive director, you've got to understand you're going to be, people don't like change a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in nonprofits do so because they get grants from the government and they do their work and
Yeah.
all of that. They're great. But to completely change that model and to become 100% independent
Yeah.
and generate new revenue lines and new sustainability lines, that's scary to
Yeah.
a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think as a leader, you have to understand that, and it's part of change management.
Yeah.
And one of the things you have to change is yourself, by the way. You have to be ready for that as well, because you're
Yeah.
going to be, I got to tell you, I was one of the ones who was scared
Yeah, for
at the
sure.
time. So that's very important. You have to get the right people on the bus.
Mm.
Okay. And once
You're
you get,
talking my terms.
there
Like,
we go.
yes, this is like entrepreneur, like operating system terms. You got to get the right people. If the team is not someone you want to bring to Mars, then they are not going to.
And you don't have a lot of time. So
No.
it's a question where you can't change all the people that are
Mhm.
existing on the bus. You don't
Yeah.
have time for that.
Yeah.
So you have to let them make that decision, or
Mhm.
you have to make the decision for them.
Yeah.
So that's happened too. It's not pretty.
Yeah.
It's not. It's one of the unfortunate parts of being an entrepreneur or,
Yeah.
or charting your own course.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing that we had to do. The second thing we had to do, and the last thing I did actually in terms of all of this, was change the board.
Mm.
And in retrospect, I think I made a mistake there. I think I should have challenged the board to shift very quickly,
Mm.
because there was a lot of times that I had to convince the board that we were doing the right thing. And it was
Mm.
a lot of, because we had the wrong people on the bus
Yeah.
at the board at that point.
Yeah.
They were good people. It's just they were used to, just like my old team,
Mm.
doing things an old way,
Yeah.
and they weren't necessarily embracing the new way.
Yeah.
Once we did that, it was a lot easier because everybody was speaking from the same book and the
Yeah.
same instruction manual.
Yep. Yep.
So when we went out to the industry
Yeah.
to get support from them, it was a lot easier. And you know what? People, it's not that hard. If you speak about what you do with enthusiasm,
Mm-hmm.
if you show competency in terms of following up, and you show equity in terms of making sure that it's a win-win scenario,
Mm.
you'd be surprised how many people want to work with you.
Mm.
Those are very simple things, but you'd be surprised how many companies don't do that. They either don't show the enthusiasm or the dynamic. How am I supposed to get excited about your product if you're not excited about your product?
100%.
Right?
Yes.
And if I send you an email because we had this meeting and you don't follow up,
Mm-hmm.
what does that tell me about you? It
Mhm.
sounds like an incompetency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, if I find out that you're sort of taking all the profit and I'm not getting a very good product out of it for
Yeah.
what I bought,
Yeah.
it's not very much of a partnership. It's not very much of an equitable partnership. So it's very simple to do. If you get that formula down, we never found clients and supporters and partners hard to find.
So now you speak completely my language, which is in the entrepreneur world's language. Rather unusual from interviewing someone who's in
In the
nonprofit,
nonprofit,
right? So now, how did you even start? You start by picking up the phone, calling people in the industry?
Yeah. So what I started was I realized I had to do some research.
Yeah.
So we had a little bit of runway. We had about 18 months or so.
Mhm.
So I mapped out who the players were in the industry, who
Mhm.
were the big,
Who has a
who had
most
the
money?
clout, who had
Yeah.
the clout
Yeah.
and the branding and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. And I wanted to talk to a bunch of CEOs
Yeah.
of small and medium-sized enterprises to see what their pain points were,
Yeah.
how we could help them. So luckily, we were able to do that. There were a lot of CEOs that, if you call them up,
Yeah,
believe
yeah,
it or not, they'll meet with you and
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
to you, and they want to hear because they're like, they were interested to find out what the environment looks like.
Yeah.
So we had a couple of big players on the horizon. One of them was a national association of, it was an industry association of larger pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the time they were called RX&D, and now they're called Innovative Medicines Canada.
Mhm.
And this was a big influential organization, and I had my sights on them. And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, if I partner with them,
Yeah.
that'll cause a splash. That'll
Yeah.
cause a ripple effect within the industry.
Yeah.
And people go, ooh, what's that? And who's this BioTalent Canada now?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
everything else. So that's what we did. We had our sights on them, and I was relentless. I pursued them through multiple levels.
Yeah.
They were listening. They liked the idea of partnering with an HR-focused
Mhm.
organization. And so sure enough, about 12 years ago when we started the partnership program, they came on as our top level partner. We called
Yeah.
it the platinum level.
Yeah.
And they've been there ever since. They've been our partner for 12 years, never missed a year.
Wow.
And that was the foundation on which we built this partnership program that now generates over $1 million for us every year,
Mm.
and has more than 80 partners in it. And we have
Wow.
about a 95% retention rate. So people partner with us not for 1 year, they partner with us for multiple years.
Yeah.
And it's been great. We have partners across the country, every province, academia, University of Waterloo. We were mentioning
Yes.
it off camera that you did a co-op program there.
We are
And,
very famous for
Oh, there we go. There's one of our.
biotechnology too.
They're just one of our partners
Yep.
across Canada, and it's been really, really good because now we've got this sort of advisory board that tells us what the industry needs in terms of talent and
Yeah.
in terms of skills development. So it's this wonderful think tank that supports us, and we support them. It's an old adage where you dance with the one that brings you.
Yeah.
And so all of these partners are the ones that brought us. They're the ones that supported us through the years and now. And so we support them. We try to make sure that they get what they need from us. A lot of that time that's networking. That can be business development.
Yep.
We introduce them around. It can be government relations and advocacy because we deal with the government a lot.
Yeah.
So all of these things that they become partners for, and it's been a great ride. And it has been very entrepreneurial. It has been very interesting I think, for a lot of the people who stayed and who joined BioTalent Canada along the way. I think they learned a lot of skills and they learned a lot of very interesting things. I know I did. I know I'm twice the I'm twice the person I was when I started BioTalent Canada because of what the industry taught me.
Wow, that's such an amazing story. And I'm glad that you're sharing that because a lot of people are, I would say a couple of the organizations that I work with, they are at this pivotal moment
Yes.
of like maybe the revenue is coming down and they don't know what to do. They're a little bit paralyzed in terms of what they can do to scale back up. And that was such an amazing sharing.
It's a tough. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a tough gig. It's not for everybody. It's not for the meek. It's not for the meek and the mild.
Yes.
Because it is a scary thing. Because a lot of people, you're talking about people's livelihoods,
Yeah.
their careers, how they pay for their houses, and apartments, and their children, and so a lot of things. So it takes a good amount of fearlessness,
Yes.
and courage to do it. And it's not everybody has it, but for those nonprofits out there. There are sometimes you're not going to find the core competency within your team existing. And it is some of the harder the decisions you make at the beginning, the better off I think you're going to be. You have to recognize, let's face it, if you're an accounting firm, if you're going to change into an accounting firm, if you're going to go from a marketing firm to an accounting firm, you're going to need accountants. You're going to need competencies that a marketing firm didn't need. And this is the same idea. If you're going to turn into an organization that is generating its own revenues, you're going to have to become a sales and marketing organization to a certain extent. Doesn't mean you have to leave everything behind, but there's going to be some core competencies you're going to have to acquire. And that's not easy. It means you're going to have to hire. It means you're going to have to change. And the hardest change is probably going to be looking in the mirror and trying to change the way you look at the business. Because if you're going to continue to lead it, you do have to look at it differently.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that. That's a hard one, looking in the mirror and saying, gee, I've got to change that. That's a really tough one for I think, CEOs or executive directors.
Some CEO, I mean, one particular that I was thinking of that I work closely with was hired to do the change. And they know full in. But what they are struggling typically is the team, the existing team, who's like, well, like in the past, this is how I had always been doing. So not in like when there is a separation, employee separation, not necessarily initiated by the organization, but rather like a volunteer person that decided to go, and not until probably the end of the term, that person comes up, oh yeah, we got to do all these things to make money. And it's just the mentality that didn't shift early enough. It was like really late.
It's really tough because in nonprofits, I mean, a lot of people go into the nonprofits because it's cause driven, it's mission. People feel attached and personally implicated in the mission and vision. For that, they're often willing to sacrifice upward mobility, sometimes money, and I mean in compensation. So, but the issue is that if you're going to turn yourself into an organization that is a revenue generator and is a bit of a sales and marketing, you can't continue to operate solely with a nonprofit mentality.
Yeah.
There's a reason why public companies have a reputation for being brutal and being very clinical and very decisive about the people that they hire and the things they're going to do, because they can't do it otherwise. Because if they don't, they'll go bankrupt. They can't keep a non-performer under the parameters that they're judging performance for years. They can't afford to do that. So I'm not saying that every nonprofit has to become brutal, but you have to examine those tactics and understand that there's going to be a little bit about it. Is that if you're going to change, you can't stop the train and try to pick up every straggler and everybody who's deciding whether or not they want to get on the train. The train has to go. And either you pick up people as you go who are running alongside the train and can run as fast as the train, or you make room on the train for those people. There's going to be, again, it's a silly metaphor, but it's true. And it's unfortunate that those decisions have to be made. But if you're you can't transition an organization and have the same people. That's impossible. In my experience, it's almost impossible to get an entire team to transition their thinking and their competencies and their skills and their outlook for a transition like that, to go from a wholly dependent organization to an independent organization. That requires usually a refresh of perspective, of skills, and of motivations.
100%. There's always that saying that whoever that gets you to the current level would not be able to get you to the next level, right? So
sure, if you take a look at you, well, we know this as an entrepreneur. A lot of the times, what starts out with a startup, you get to a certain aspect, and that CEO has to change because we need a new leader in there with the experience and the skills to get them to that next plateau. So it's very rarely that it's the same time. So it happens. It happens, but it's rare.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, you know what? This has been fantastic sharing. I really appreciate the conversation that we have, especially because you're speaking all the entrepreneur terms that I am so accustomed to, and bringing that and mixing that with the nonprofit world. That's amazing.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it. It was a great great being here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. As we wrap up, I want to share a bit more about what we do at Otis Financial Solutions. For the past 18 years, Otis Financial Solutions has been dedicated to enhancing the financial management and strategic planning capabilities of hundreds of associations and nonprofits across Canada. Our extensive experience has enabled us to deliver tailored financial solutions that drive growth and enhance sustainability for nonprofits and associations. If you are interested in learning more about how Otis Financial Solutions can support your organization, I would love to offer you a no-obligation 20-minute call. Let's discuss your unique challenges and explore how we would be able to help you achieve your goals.